Everyone thought the neighborhood was peaceful until the first warning slipped under the gate. No cookies, no introductions, no friendly wave. Just 6 cold words typed in black ink. Failure to remove aggressive canines may result in legal escalation. Elaine held the paper in one hand, her bare feet pressing into the garden soil. Brutus sniffed it once, then peed on it. I should have taken it seriously, but instead I laughed. That was my mistake. We'd been at the farm 2 weeks, just long enough to fall into rhythm. Sunrise coffee steaming against the valley air, eggs collected warm from the coop, goats complaining about everything like they were born unionized. Silence stretched across the land so deep it felt almost staged. Elaine said it was the first place that didn't feel like borrowed time. No traffic, no stairs, no rules that weren't our own. She trusted it. I didn't. Not when you've lived long enough to know peace is the first thing that gets ambushed. That morning, Brutus froze near the gravel, tail stiff, head low. The calm before the storm. Then she appeared, khakis, spotless white sneakers, skin pulled tight across a smile that didn't touch her eyes. She walked like she owned the ground. "I'm Karen Winthrop," she announced, "president of Maple Hollow HOA. Her voice dripped sugar, the kind that rots teeth. I didn't answer. I was still trying to figure out how our farm even had an HOA. She stepped forward and extended a paper like it was a peace offering. "Due to recent boundary adjustments, your parcel now falls under our jurisdiction. Section 14C. Elaine appeared silently beside me. Echo flanked her left. Karen's eyes went to the dogs, and for the first time her smile cracked. Brutus didn't bark. Delta didn't lunge. They simply watched, steady, intelligent, judging. Karen's hand trembled against the clipboard. "You may want to review our pet policies," she said, voice tighter now. "We have very specific guidelines regarding breed, noise, temperament." "They don't bark," I said flatly. "Yes," Karen whispered, "I can see that." Her heels clicked once against the gravel. Brutus stepped forward in silence, head high, weight balanced. Echo mirrored him. Delta slithered from the garden, appearing on her flank like he'd grown from the dirt. Karen stopped breathing. For a moment, even the breeze quit moving. Then she stepped back. "They'll need to be reviewed," she muttered. Elaine tilted her head. "You plan on sending someone into our yard to assess them?" Karen smiled, that smile again, the one that meant the opposite of kindness. "I think we'll let the citations do that for us." She walked away faster than she arrived, but not fast enough to hide the way she kept glancing at the backs of her ankles, like she knew exactly how closely she was being tracked. The paper she left was stapled crooked. Violations pre-checked, unpermitted use of non-domestic animals, unregulated structure, barking animals of tactical appearance. Elaine read every line, tossed it into the burn barrel, and stood silently as the words curled and disappeared into ash. Brutus sat beside her, tail stiff, watching the smoke rise like it was an enemy formation. That night I woke to footsteps, not human ones. Echo was circling the porch slow, nose in the wind. Elaine sat on the swing in her hoodie, knees pulled up, hand resting on a leash she didn't need. Her eyes didn't leave the dark. "You good?" I asked softly. "Almost," she whispered. The next morning a new envelope waited at the gate. No greeting, no return address. Just 6 words: "You've been warned. Comply or escalate." Trixie, our neighbor, the kind of woman who could turn a thunderstorm into a drinking game, snatched the letter, sniffed it, then tossed it to a goat. "Smells like insecurity and low blood sugar," she muttered. "If Karen shows up again, Sparkle's going live." Sparkle wasn't a person, it was her taser. And yes, she'd used it on a snake, twice. But snakes weren't the problem anymore. Because just after breakfast, the drone came. Black, silent, hovering above the barn like a vulture that hadn't chosen its meal yet. Brutus sat directly under it, still as stone, watching, tracking, not barking. I grabbed a wrench and stepped into its view. It zipped away faster than I could blink. Elaine was already inside, laptop open, pulling the feed. "That's not a toy," she said quietly. "Thermal lens, possibly audio capture, low-end civilian export, maybe military surplus." "For what?" I asked. She closed the laptop. "To see what makes you jump." Then she looked at me, eyes sharp, voice cold. "This isn't about dogs." And in that moment I knew she was right. This wasn't neighborly tension. This wasn't a misunderstanding. We weren't being welcomed. We were being sized up. And what was coming next wasn't an accident. Everyone thought it was just paranoia until the goats stopped chewing. 2 days after the drone, the morning felt heavier. The animals knew first. Brutus sat on the porch, ears twitching but body still. Echo pressed herself against the tool bench. Delta didn't even blink, just stood at the back fence like a statue, nose low, eyes locked on something none of us could see. Elaine noticed it before I did. She was putting away tools in the barn when she stopped mid-step. "She's circling," she muttered. I followed her gaze across the field. And there she was again. Karen. Same khakis, same sneakers, slow, deliberate march like she was patrolling a war zone. No clipboard this time, just her phone held high like a badge of authority. "Maybe she's just walking," I said, though even I didn't believe it. Elaine didn't answer. She crouched beside Brutus and tugged lightly at his collar like she was checking armor. Her face was different now, hardened, calculating. Trixie appeared behind me with her mason jar of something probably illegal. She squinted. "I haven't seen that face since Kandahar. You know what that means, right?" "No," I muttered. "She's about to outplan God." That night Brutus didn't patrol. He posted up, sat at the porch steps like a carved sentinel, eyes reflecting every shadow. Echo slinked the perimeter like a ghost. Delta vanished into the orchard, moving unseen. Even the goats pressed themselves to the back wall of their pen, panting as if they'd been chased. The gate latch wasn't broken. It had been opened. Elaine crouched in the grass, fingertips brushing the dirt. Boot tread, male, about 180, soft heel. "You're joking," I whispered. She shot me a look colder than the night air. "No." And just like that, my stomach sank. This wasn't HOA games anymore. Someone had crossed the line, literally. Hours later, a figure appeared at the edge of the light cone, just standing there, not hiding, not moving, watching. Elaine walked out barefoot, hand resting on Brutus's harness, the other gripping a small black remote. "Hey," I called, "you on our property?" No answer. Elaine clicked the remote. The floodlight blasted full intensity, blinding white, and the figure was gone, not running, not stumbling, just gone. The next morning, a new envelope arrived in the mailbox. This one sealed in red wax with the Maple Hollow emblem, dogwood branches twisted into barbed wire. Inside, ongoing aggressive behavior noted. Immediate compliance is mandatory, animal removal pending. Attached was a photograph, Elaine at the fence, Brutus at her side, her hand on his back, his head tilted up like it was staged, except we hadn't taken it, someone had, from inside our property line. Trixie tilted the photo sideways. If they wanted a headshot, they could have at least caught my good side. Elaine didn't blink. She was already pulling video feeds. "Civilian gear, trained movement," she muttered. "Knows how to avoid light cones." She zoomed in on the heat overlay. A face flickered for half a second, then another blip, the drone. Same shape, same silent engine, but this time with a secondary arm mounted beneath. "That's a payload mount," Elaine whispered. "Could be gas, could be sampling, could just be intimidation." "You think this is Karen?" I asked. Elaine's voice was flat. "Karen's not smart enough to fly it, but she's smart enough to pay someone who is." That afternoon, Karen strolled by again. No phone, no clipboard, just eyes sweeping, calculating. She paused at the fence while Elaine knelt in the garden. Brutus moved in front of her, silent wall of muscle and memory. Karen tilted her head slightly, her voice almost too soft to hear. "Sometimes it's not the dogs that are the problem, it's the people who think they control them." I stepped forward. "What was that?" She smiled, just a safety tip, then she walked away. That night I couldn't sleep, not out of fear, out of clarity. This wasn't misunderstanding, this was reconnaissance, preparation. And at 3:17 a.m., Brutus rose from his place at the porch, tail stiff, shoulders squared, the kind of stance he only took in combat zones. Elaine stepped outside, eyes locked on the tree line. "He's here," she whispered. And there he was, a man in a dark hoodie inside the fence, watching. This wasn't surveillance anymore, this was a probe. And probes always come before something bigger. The silence stretched, even the crickets stopped. Then gravel crunched up the drive, 3 men appeared, not neighbors, not cops. HOA compliance officers, at least that's what their jackets said, but they weren't carrying pens. One had a GoPro strapped to his head, one had a stun baton, the last carried bolt cutters. Trixie leaned out of her trailer, squinting. Well, looks like the HOA's recruiting off Craigslist again. Elaine was already at the gate. Calm, hoodie pulled tight, hands in pockets, no wasted words, no wasted movements. Brutus behind her, solid as stone. Echo crouched in the shadows. Delta, nowhere in sight. That was her move, silent flank, surprise. Ma'am, the lead man called. We're here under Section 14C for a non-compliance inspection. Elaine tilted her head a fraction, the kind of tilt that means you get one chance to walk away. He raised a laminated notice. Due to repeated animal aggression and failure to comply, we're authorized to assess and, if necessary, initiate corrective seizure. You crossed our line, Elaine said flatly. You have no permission to be here. Clipboard man stammered. The stun baton guy smirked. Or what? You'll call your lawyer. Elaine's voice turned ice. I won't need to. Echo shifted, eyes locked on the man's heel like she could see his pulse. He flinched. Standards don't carry weapons, I said from behind. You're not inspectors, you're trespassers. That was when bolt cutter guy made his mistake. He reached for the latch. Click. Delta exploded from the orchard like thunder in a bottle. Fast, silent, controlled. She slammed into him, not biting, not scratching, just pure force, sending him sprawling into the dirt, bolt cutters flying into a rose bush. Clipboard man screamed, dropping his notice. Baton guy froze, pinned by Echo's glare. Brutus stepped forward, one deliberate stride. That was all it took. Sweat bloomed on their foreheads. You should call them off, one muttered. Elaine's hand snapped once. They haven't been called on. And in the silence that followed, everyone knew they were already beaten. Everyone thought the fight ended at the gate until the cruiser lights hit our gravel. It was the kind of sound that wakes you before you're ready. Tires crunching, deliberate, measured. Not a neighbor checking in, not a friendly visit. This was official, and official always meant planned. By the time I stepped onto the porch, the uniforms were already out. 2 cruisers, 4 officers, hands resting on belts. Gloves pulled tight, eyes hard. Elaine was by the barn, feeding chickens like nothing was wrong until the boots crunched behind her. Ma'am, the lead officer barked, moving fast. Put the bucket down, hands where we can see them. Elaine crouched, set the feed pail down neatly, stood slow. Brutus loomed at the barn's edge, eyes burning like he'd mapped every artery in the man's body. What's this? I demanded, striding forward. Sir, stop right there, another officer snapped. She's my wife, I growled. And she's being taken into custody. His voice cracked like cold glass. Elaine's voice cut sharper than mine. Custody for what? The officer opened a folder like he was reading a script. Detained under Civil Order 14C, endangerment, obstruction of compliance enforcement, and use of aggressive animals to intimidate neighborhood representatives. My chest burned. Aggressive, they didn't attack anyone, they didn't bite, they followed every command. No, Elaine said quietly, they have the person Karen wants. Then she turned, calm as ever, and placed her hands behind her back. The cuff snapped shut, too loud, echoing across the field. Brutus took one step forward, muscles taut like steel cables ready to snap. Don't, Elaine ordered. Her voice broke the night. Brutus froze, chest heaving, teeth bared but silent. That single word held him where even bullets wouldn't. Then the white van pulled up. No logo, 2 men in animal control vests. One slid the door open. The other uncoiled 3 leashes. When the clips caught the light, something shattered in my chest. Are those the dogs? One asked nervously. The officer nodded. Per Order 3B, they're being seized for evaluation, aggression profile. They're not aggressive, I shouted. You've got video, show it. Orders from the board, the handler muttered. You can appeal. Appeal, the word tasted like poison. Brutus stepped forward, slow, deliberate. His head turned back to Elaine, not barking, not whining, just waiting, begging for her signal. She couldn't give it. Echo collapsed flat against the ground, refusing to move. The officer tugged. Nothing. Only when I knelt beside her and whispered, "It's okay, girl, we'll get you home," did she rise, trembling. Delta didn't come at all. They dragged her from the barn, her eyes locked on Elaine the entire time like she couldn't understand betrayal. Karen arrived just as the van doors shut. Sunglasses, perfect lipstick. A tote bag too polished for gravel roads, she smiled like it was a wedding. Heartbreaking, she sighed. All this because some people refuse to respect community guidelines. Elaine turned her head just slightly, her voice low and razor sharp. You weaponized fear. Karen's lips twitched, and you weaponized dogs. Trixie stormed out, phone high, hair wild. Fraud, she barked. Time-stamped footage, GPS synced, everyone's seeing this. Karen raised her own phone, lips curling. Good, I love a counterclaim. She turned to me. You should have stayed quiet. I stepped toward her. She retreated half a step, but it was enough. You're going to wish we had, I hissed. Elaine didn't flinch as they placed her in the back of the cruiser. Didn't cry, didn't beg. Only one nervous tick betrayed her, the faint twitch of her fingers against the seat cushion. She only did that after explosions. The van disappeared down the road with everything that made our home alive inside it. Elaine gone. Dogs gone. Silence swallowing the farm. And I did nothing, because some stupid part of me still believed the system would be fair. That night the farm was a graveyard. No pause, no breath, just ghosts. 3 leashes hung untouched by the door. Every time the wind moved them, they clinked like handcuffs. By morning, the real hit landed. A gold-sealed envelope in the mailbox. Karen's name at the top. Civil suit. $250,000 in emotional distress, filed the day before the arrest. This was never about safety, never about noise. It was always about control. Elaine came home 42 hours later. No headlines, no charges, no apology, just dropped off like a library book. Overdue, worn, still intact. She didn't speak, not to the officer, not to me. She walked past the porch straight to the kennels. 3 crates, empty, 3 bowls, untouched. 3 leashes swaying against the doorframe like ghosts still tugged them. Her fingers curled around the edge of Brutus's crate. Not shaking, just solid. That was her way. When most braced, she grounded. Then she walked back to me, silent, took the coffee from my hand, sat and stared at the horizon. No words passed between us, but the silence wasn't empty, it was loaded. Inside, Trixie was already cooking war, papers scattered across the table, tabs open, printer screeching like it was in labor. You remember when I said Karen's the kind of person who lies about recycling, she muttered. I owe her an apology, she's worse. Elaine stood, hands braced against the back of a chair, posture straight like she was briefing a mission. What is it? Trixie flipped a file. Noise complaint? Fake. Filed same day Karen petitioned the county to expand vehicular access through your west field. I frowned, the one behind the goat pen. The same, but that's not all. She filed a zoning appeal to revoke your animal housing designation, not legal, but enough to stall you. I felt my fists clench without realizing. They don't just want us stressed, they want us gone. Trixie opened her laptop, and then I found this. She hit play. Karen's voice filled the room. They've got no political capital, no allies, one good inspection report and a few scared neighbors. They'll leave. People like that always leave. Elaine didn't blink. Wrong, she whispered. Everyone thought it was just neighbor drama, until we found the hatch behind Karen's fence. It started with sleepless nights. Elaine packing the porch, Brutus restless by the door, Trixie digging through files like a detective hopped up on caffeine and spite. I was supposed to be sleeping, but instead I sat with the laptop open, rewatching drone footage for the 4th time. Hopping, maybe, to find a mistake. And then I saw it. At first it looked like a shed, just a shadow in the tree line. But the drone shifted, angle sliding just enough to reveal corners too square, walls too thick, not a shed. A foundation, poured cement, covered with netting and brush. One corner exposed just enough to reveal a sealed metal hatch. "Elaine," I called, voice shaking. She padded over in her hoodie, steaming coffee in hand, eyes half-shadowed from days without sleep. She leaned in close. "That's military." I swallowed hard. "Then what the hell is it doing behind Karen's house?" She bent closer, tapped the screen. "That seal, old containment model, government issue, not commercial." I felt my throat tighten. Buried asset. Or worse. 15 minutes later, Trixie's trailer lit up like NORAD on high alert. She stumbled in with slippers, Red Bull, and a folder thick enough to choke a mule. "You are not going to like this," she muttered. "Try me," I said. "That foundation, registered under Trimark Holdings, except Trimark doesn't exist. It's a shell for a defunct contractor, Vector Ridge Solutions." Elaine's face went still. "I know that name." Trixie nodded. "They shut down after a chemical breach in Texas 5 years ago, case sealed under federal privilege." I leaned forward. "Breach of what?" Trixie pulled out a PDF, slid it across the table like a magician laying the final card. "VX derivatives, modified." The air froze. Elaine exhaled slowly. "Nerve agent." I dropped hard into a chair. My chest felt hollow. All the noise, all the harassment, the fake violations. It wasn't about dogs or fences, it was cover. Elaine's voice was calm but cold. "She's not protecting the neighborhood, she's hiding evidence." At 11:22 a.m., a black SUV pulled up to the gate. No plates, no hesitation. Out stepped a woman in tactical boots and mirrored sunglasses, posture straight as iron. Elaine strode out to meet her. "Major Elkins," she said. "Colonel now," the woman corrected. "Heard you stirred a hornet's nest." "I need it on record," Elaine replied. Elkins handed her a hard drive. "You want the clean version or the dirty one?" Elaine didn't blink. "Both." We gathered around the monitor. Archived footage rolled. 5 years ago, same land, same hatch. Hazmat suits moving barrel after barrel underground. Each one marked VXCO and V5, highly volatile, illegal to store anywhere near civilians. Guess whose signature cleared the paperwork? Karen Winthrop. Trixie's voice cracked. Why the hell was she even involved? Elaine's eyes hardened. She wasn't supposed to be. The screen flashed another file. Email header, final staging before Bari. Do not mention VR name in public. HOA transfer file attached. Time-stamped 3 months before Karen formed Maple Hollow HOA. My blood ran cold. She built the HOA to cover this. Every fake violation, every zoning trick, every threat, it was scaffolding. A shield for something toxic buried in plain sight. Elaine turned to me. "This isn't civil anymore, this is federal." I nodded, chest burning. And if we're right, she's not the only one dirty. We didn't even get to breathe before glass shattered out back. The barn window exploded inward. Elaine moved first, fast, silent, hand already gripping her baton. I followed with the heavy flashlight. Inside, a figure moved in the smoke, hood low, gloves tight, carrying something. Then it slipped. A gas can, beside it our hard drive still spinning. The barn lit before I reached the door. Fire crawling fast, snapping through hay like it had teeth. We weren't just fighting for evidence anymore. We were fighting to survive. Elaine barked orders like a drill sergeant. "Jack south side, Trixie lock in." Trixie stumbled in from her trailer, barefoot, clutching her laptop like it was a newborn. "They're not bluffing. 3, no, 4 of them, masks, night optics." Elaine shoved a flash drive into her hand. "Bunker, if they get the footage, they bury us." I grabbed the steel flashlight, lungs already choking on smoke. One attacker was yanking cans from the wall when I caught him from behind, metal to spine. He dropped hard, lighter tumbling out of his hand. I kicked it away. But 2 more surged from the shadows. One raised a taser, too late to dodge. Pain hit like lightning. My chest locked, muscles jerking, the world splitting into white. I hit the dirt, helpless. Footsteps closed in. Taser guy, smug, walking slow like I was already tagged and bagged. He raised the prongs again. Then came the sound. Not human, low, heavy, controlled. Brutus. I couldn't move my head, but I saw the silhouette. Massive, ears up, breath fogging cold. He hit center mass like a freight train. The taser flew skyward. The man went down so hard the dirt spit back at him. Brutus didn't bark, didn't growl. He stood over the man, still silent, waiting for permission. Echo slinked in from the shadows. Delta flanked wide. The pack was home. Elaine appeared through smoke, radio crackling in one hand, baton in the other. Two down, one heading for the trailer. I staggered to my feet, legs weak but moving. Trixie. Her trailer door hung open. Inside, one man cornered her, laptop crushed beneath his boot. She clutched a wrench like a claymore. "You touch me," she hissed, "and I'll sue your grandkids into eviction." The man raised a fist. Elaine didn't knock, she didn't warn. 2 steps, a knee to his gut, an elbow to his jaw. He collapsed like a puppet with strings cut. "You good?" she asked. Trixie gasped, nodding, clutching her laptop like life itself. Outside, the dogs stood guard like statues. One attacker tried to run. Echo tripped him. Delta pinned him. Brutus didn't move, didn't chase. He just watched me, eyes steady. "You're home," I whispered. He didn't wag, didn't bark. He just sat like a soldier back on post. Everyone thought the fire was the climax until the sheriff asked if we'd seen Karen. By the time the barn stopped smoldering, the farm smelled like smoke and betrayal. Squad cars rolled in late, sirens off, lights muted. Sheriff Carter stepped out slow, eyes scanning the wreckage like he'd walked into something he couldn't spin away. Elaine didn't flinch. She was still gripping Brutus's harness, smoke streaking her face, Delta packing tight circles at her feet. Trixie sat on the porch clutching her laptop like it was an infant that had just survived a bombing. Carter's voice cracked the silence. "Have you seen Karen?" Elaine narrowed her eyes. "Not since the last warrant." "She's gone." He shifted his weight, heavy with shame. "House is empty, no contact for 48 hours, cars missing, HOA accounts drained." He showed us a phone screen bank app, balance zero. $42,000 disappeared overnight. I stared across the valley toward her house. Dark, dead, except for one thing, the clipboard, sitting on her porch rail, snapped in half. Wherever Karen went, she hadn't left in a panic. She'd left like someone with a plan. And she'd left pieces behind. That night, Brutus sat by the gate, not sleeping, not packing, just staring at the empty house like it owed him something. Elaine sat on the porch with her old service bag at her feet, untouched for years. I knew what it meant the moment I saw it. She wasn't just reacting anymore. She was mobilizing. The first headline hit at dawn. HOA president linked to hazardous waste cover-up. Karen's face splashed across the screen, clipboard raised like a weapon. Trixie hadn't slept, hair tangled, Red Bull cans stacked like a fort. She muttered under her breath as she typed. 15 hashtags, 3 mirror accounts, encryption layered twice. Try to scrub this, Karen. By 9:00 a.m., 60,000 views. Comments, shares, tips pouring in. People didn't just watch, they added fuel. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like exposure. I stood at the window watching the valley stretch gray under the morning sky, feeling naked. Viral doesn't feel like fame. It feels like dissection. Then came the second headline. Sheriff's office tied to HOA corruption. Carter's photo beneath the headline, jaw tight, eyes caught mid-regret. The comments bit sharp. Who else is on Karen's payroll? Check her trash. Bet she buried bodies with the chemicals. It was bigger than Karen now. By noon, a local anchor was parked across the street, filming a segment against our fence line. The Mason family has remained mostly silent, but evidence suggests this is more than a zoning dispute. It may be a case study in neighborhood-level authoritarianism. Elaine didn't wave, didn't smile, just nodded once. Brutus pressed against her leg. Emails began pouring in. A teacher in Arizona, my HOA banned my son's wheelchair ramp. You're giving people hope. A man in Colorado, we lost our dogs. Yours made it home. Finish what we couldn't. Trixie slapped a new document on the table around 2 p.m. Jack. Gold. It was an invoice, Karen's signature rooted to Crater Logistics. Memo line, material relocation, burn site coverage. Elaine whispered the words like a sentence. She didn't just cover it up, she paid to erase it. And that was it, the final nail, proof of payment, cover-up in writing. But before we could celebrate, the sheriff returned. No lights this time, no backup, just Carter, shoulders sagging, eyes hollow. He climbed the porch steps like a man carrying a coffin on his back. "I came to ask you," he muttered, "not as law, as someone tired." Elaine's gaze was sharp. Tired of what? He looked at me, at fighting battles that never end. I stared at him, the man who'd let Karen twist the law until it broke. The man who could have stopped this months ago. For half a second I wanted to quit, walk away, forget the fight, just live quiet with my wife, my dogs, my land. But then I looked at Elaine. Her eyes didn't blink, her jaw didn't soften. Carter shook his head. "You push this harder, people will get hurt." Elaine stepped forward, voice like ice. "They already have." He didn't argue, he didn't even look at us again. Just turned, climbed into his cruiser, and drove off slower than he arrived. That night, Brutus didn't leave the gate. His breath fogged in the air, steady, patient. Watching Karen's empty house like he knew she wasn't finished. And then the post started. An account named Karen Lives appeared under our videos. Doctored clips of Brutus barking, cut to look violent. A deepfake of Trixie supposedly tampering with mail. One comment cut through the noise: "You spy on us, we spy better." Minutes later, a new upload appeared. Drone footage. Elaine a year ago off-duty sitting on the porch with a book, laughing, private, unaware. My blood went cold. Elaine leaned close, eyes locked on her own image. She's had eyes on us longer than we thought. Trixie's fingers flew across her keyboard. IP says offshore, metadata scrubbed. This wasn't Karen in her living room, this was professional. Elaine taped the drone photo to the evidence board, circled it in red. "This isn't surveillance." She stepped back, her voice dropped low. "This is war." The next morning the letter came. No stamp, no sender, just one sentence typed bold. "She knows what you found, and she has the rest." Elaine didn't say a word. She just walked to the shed, dragged out her service bag, brushed the dust off the name tape. Whatever was coming next, she'd been ready for it for years. Everyone thought court would bring closure, until the fire alarm screamed mid-trial. We filed everything at first light. Audio recordings, drone footage, zoning maps, bank transfers. The Crater Logistics invoice, proof Karen paid to bury more than just rules. We didn't talk much while packing it. Elaine laced her boots in silence. Trixie stacked papers like she was prepping for both trial and apocalypse. Me, I just stared at the wall where we'd pinned the photo of Elaine, unaware on the porch a year ago, stalked by a drone. She hadn't just come for our land. She invaded our lives before we even knew it. "Ready?" Elaine asked. I nodded, but my chest said no. Court wasn't marble halls or oak benches. Just a small room, a blinking projector, and Judge Ramirez. Lines etched so deep in her face it looked like she'd been carrying other people's sins for decades. Karen wasn't there, but her lawyer was, trim, polished, soulless. The kind of man who'd call war crimes clerical errors. Ramirez tapped her glasses. "Let's begin." Trixie stood first, voice fierce despite her messy bun and coffee-stained hoodie. "Your Honor, this file contains proof of digital harassment, hazardous waste cover-ups, and abuse of civic authority, with corroborating timestamps and federal records." She hit play. Karen's voice filled the courtroom. "Get them gone. Court fines, noise, I don't care, I want that land, I want them out." The judge's pen froze mid-stroke. Next came Carter's voice. "No evidence on site, burns clean." Then a contractor. "We'll drop the drums beneath the goat line, they'll never find it." Ramirez's jaw tightened. She turned her gaze to Elaine. "VX." Elaine stepped forward, calm as a soldier giving a briefing. "Military-grade derivative, improperly sealed, buried under civilian farmland." She placed the invoice on the bench. Karen's signature stared up like a confession. The silence thickened. You could hear my pulse hammering against the walls. Then, the fire alarm screamed. Sprinklers erupted, soaking the room in icy rain. Court security shouted over the chaos. Evacuate, bomb threat. Papers soaked, drives at risk, evidence scattering. I grabbed the box, clutching it to my chest as water streamed down my back. One word tore through the noise. Elaine's Karen. She didn't run, didn't panic, just walked out calm, eyes cutting through the crowd. Outside chaos, reporters, neighbors, protesters waving cardboard signs. One read HOAs are hammering America. Another free the dogs. The judge's clerk rushed over, soaked and shaking. The call came from the same spoofed IP tied to Karen lives. It wasn't random. Elaine nodded once, then pulled out her phone. Sent one text to a contact that didn't exist on paper. 15 minutes later, a black federal SUV pulled into the lot. Doors opened. Agents stepped out, and between them, Karen. Same beige visor, same polished braid. Clipboard clutched like it was scripture, cuffs snapping against her wrists. The agent announced it plain. Attempted to board a flight out of Colorado, alias Katie Wynn. HOA server backup found in luggage. Karen saw us across the lot. She didn't flinch, didn't beg, just smiled. Inside, Ramirez flipped through the final folder Trixie had kept dry under her jacket. Crater Logistics contracts. Signed zoning approvals. 6 years of abuse stitched together with 3 signatures. Her verdict came low, firm. You were absolutely right. Trixie choked back a laugh, water dripping from her hair. That's it. That's what we've been fighting for. Elaine didn't speak. She just unclenched her jaw. That was enough. As Karen was led back to the SUV, she turned her head for the first time, eyes locked on Elaine. You think this ends with me? She hissed. Elaine didn't blink, didn't speak. She just turned her back. Karen's smile faltered. Not much, just enough. And when the SUV pulled away, I felt it, like a storm had broken. But storms don't vanish, they move. That night, Brutus rested his head on Elaine's boot, finally closing his eyes. Echo curled at the door. Delta prowled the fence line one last time before lying down. For the first time in weeks, they looked tired. Like they knew the fight was shifting, but at least they'd bought us breathing room. Still, Trixie cracked the server Karen left behind, files buried deep. One folder locked, encrypted, password protected. Inside wasn't just Karen's mess. It was a list. Names, neighborhoods, maps. Karen hadn't been alone. She was just the beginning. Everyone thought Karen's trial would end with apologies, until she laughed at the verdict. The courtroom was hushed the day they read the charges. Wire fraud, abuse of civic office, obstruction, endangering public safety through hazardous concealment. 4 counts, each one landing like a hammer. Karen stood at the defense table, hands clasped, eyes shining like she was the only one in on the joke. When the judge asked for her plea, she didn't deny it, didn't beg, she laughed. A sharp, brittle sound that made the air feel colder. You're all sheep, she sneered. You'll see, someone worse always comes next. Judge Ramirez didn't flinch. Thank you, Miss Winthrop, you may sit. 2 years, federal time. No HOA, no clipboard, no power. And when the sentence dropped, the gallery didn't clap. No neighbors stood. No friends protested. Dictators don't get ovations when the curtain falls. Outside the courthouse, someone had scrawled chalk across the sidewalk. Welcome to Karen's last meeting. Minutes permanently sealed. Trixie snapped a photo and set it as her phone background. The HOA dissolved overnight. Funds frozen, then redirected to neighborhood repairs. A new board formed. 3 veterans, 2 retirees, and 1 guy named Dave, who swore no one would ever get fined for wind chimes again. Sheriff Carter resigned the next day. Health reasons, the news said. No one bought it. They didn't need to. The silence around his name spoke louder than headlines. Elaine didn't celebrate, didn't gloat. She simply walked the property line that evening, Brutus at her side, Echo trailing behind, Delta ahead. For the first time in months, no drone buzzed overhead. No envelopes waited at the gate. No threats curled in the mailbox, just silence. The kind of silence you could trust. That week a package arrived in the mail, a formal commendation from her old unit. Civilian Tactical Defense Contribution. She tacked it on the barn wall next to Brutus's retired harness. She didn't smile, but every time she passed, her hand brushed the plaque like a quiet salute. The county certified Brutus, Echo, and Delta as retired military service dogs. Zero threat designation. Heroes on paper, heroes in truth. We kept the land, every acre. And Trixie, she bought Karen's old house. First thing she did was paint the mailbox with a sign that read, "This property is outside your control. Have a cookie." And she meant it. The smell of cinnamon rolls drifted across the street every Saturday morning like a peace treaty. Elaine turned the South Field into something more. A training ground. Every Tuesday, veterans showed up, some shaky, some scarred, and walked side by side with the dogs who understood exactly what they'd been through. Sometimes Elaine joined them. Sometimes she just sat on the porch, coffee in hand, letting the silence heal what commands couldn't. And me, for the first time in longer than I can remember, I slept. No motion alarms, no hidden drives under the bed, no fireproof lockbox tucked beneath the floorboards, just sleep, deep and quiet. I thought justice would feel like fireworks, like thunder. Turns out it feels like a long exhale, like finally unclenching a fist you forgot was tight. Still, the past doesn't disappear. Every morning I walk the fence line. Habit, muscle memory, maybe just ritual, and every time Brutus joins me. He doesn't bark anymore, doesn't freeze at every sound. He just walks steady at my side, tail flicking like a soldier who's still alert but no longer afraid. Sometimes a car passes too close to the gate. He pauses, ears twitch, then keeps walking, always watchful, always ready. And sometimes when I see a fresh letter on someone else's mailbox, a fine, a warning, a threat wrapped in rules, I think of Karen's last words. Someone worse always comes next. But then Brutus steps between me and the fence, stares up with those steady eyes, and I remember. We're ready now. They came to take what was ours. They tried to scare us, sue us, bury us. But all they did was prove that this land, this life, was worth fighting for. Everyone thought the story ended with Karen's conviction, until we opened her last folder. It came tucked deep inside the backup server, buried beneath encryption Trixie cracked after 3 sleepless nights and enough caffeine to jumpstart a tractor. At first it looked empty, just a single untitled folder, but inside a list. Names, neighborhoods, maps. Karen hadn't been acting alone. She'd been part of something larger. Elaine didn't say anything when she saw it. She just circled our land in red on the map, then drew a line through it. A mark that said never again. That night we sat on the porch. The air cool, the valley quiet, Brutus stretched at Elaine's feet, Echo curled like a shadow by the door, Delta packing the fence line one last time before settling into the grass. I expected Elaine to talk about the folder, about the list, about the fact that Karen was right. Someone worse could come next. But she didn't. She just sipped her coffee slow, staring into the horizon like it was giving her orders only she could hear. Trixie came by with cookies. She always came by with cookies now. "You realize," she said, setting the plate on the table, "Karen spent 6 years building an empire just to hide garbage." She smirked. "Guess it really was trash all along." Elaine didn't smile, but she tapped her coffee mug against Trixie's jar of sweet tea. For her, that was enough. Days turned to weeks. The headlines shifted from outrage to curiosity to something quieter. People wrote from across the country. Letters stacked up in the mailbox, some from folks who lost homes to HOA battles, others from veterans who saw themselves in the dogs who'd stood their ground. One boy sent a drawing of Brutus in crayon. The ears were too big, the legs too short, but the eyes, those were perfect. Steady, fierce, trusting. Elaine pinned it to the barn wall right next to her commendation. The farm came back to life. The grass grew tall. The goats returned to complaining about nothing. Chickens pecked in the dust like the world had never burned. Even the air felt lighter. And still every morning, Elaine walked the field with Brutus at her side. Not out of fear. Not because she expected another fight, but because it was their ritual now. proof that the land was theirs, that silence could finally belong to them. I'd follow sometimes, slower, letting the two of them take point, watching as Brutus's stride matched hers step for step. Soldier and soldier, partners who had carried the weight together and lived to see morning. One evening, Elaine turned the South Field into something new, a gathering place. Veterans came, scarred, unsteady, carrying ghosts in their eyes, and the dogs met them like family. Brutus leaning against a man who hadn't smiled in months. Echo curling against a woman who still startled at sudden sounds. Delta weaving in circles until a boy laughed for the first time since losing his father. It wasn't therapy, not in the official sense. It was something quieter, shared breath, shared scars, healing without words. Elaine didn't lead, she just watched. Sometimes she joined in, hand brushing Brutus's fur, her voice soft but steady as she gave quiet commands. Sometimes she stayed on the porch, coffee in hand, letting the dogs do what they were born to do. Protect, heal, stand. I realized something then. Justice wasn't loud. It wasn't the headlines or the trial or even Karen being led away in cuffs. Justice was this, the sound of boots on soil, the laughter of people who thought they'd forgotten how, the steady rhythm of a dog's breath at your side when you needed it most. One morning as we walked the fence, Brutus paused at the gate. A car slowed on the road, too close. He stiffened, ears flicking, eyes sharp. For a moment I thought he'd lunge. But then the car passed and Brutus simply turned his head back to me. Steady, calm, ready but not afraid. I crouched beside him, rubbed the ridge of his neck. "It's over, boy." He leaned into my hand, not with force but with trust. The kind that takes years to build and seconds to destroy. I thought about Karen then, her words echoing like a curse. Someone worse always comes next. And maybe she was right. Maybe the list on that hard drive meant more battles waited somewhere down the line. But as Brutus walked beside me, tail swaying slow, the morning light spilling across the valley, I realized something else. We weren't the same family who moved here wide-eyed and hopeful. We'd been tested, broken, pushed to the edge, and we'd chosen to stand. So maybe someone worse would come next. But when they did, they'd find us ready. And they'd find 3 dogs who'd already proven that loyalty and discipline were stronger than fear. That evening, as the sun set over the farm, Elaine sat on the porch, service bag at her feet, coffee steaming in her hands. She didn't look tired anymore. She looked steady. Brutus curled at her boots. Echo slinked under the swing. Delta prowled once along the fence before settling into the grass. I leaned against the post, watching her. "You think it's really over?" She didn't answer right away, just watched the horizon. Then she glanced at me, the faintest ghost of a smile tugging her lips. "It's never over," she said softly, "but it's ours now." And with that, the silence returned, not the fragile kind that hides danger, the earned kind, the kind you can live inside. For the first time in a long time, it felt like home.